The morning sun slowly crept through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Prince William opened his eyes to another Tuesday in December. The palace was unusually quiet at this early hour, with only the distant sound of kitchen staff preparing breakfast echoing through the long hallways. William stretched and looked over at Kate, who was already awake, but still lying in bed staring at the ceiling with a thoughtful expression on her face. Kate had been having trouble sleeping lately, though she never complained about it to anyone. Something felt different about this winter season, and she could not quite put her finger on what it was. Perhaps it was watching their own children grow up so fast, or maybe it was the weight of all the responsibilities that came with their royal duties. Whatever it was kept her mind busy even in the quiet moments like these. William got up first and walked to their large bathroom, where he splashed cold water on his face and looked at himself in the mirror. At 39 years old, he had learned to carry the weight of being second in line to the throne, but some mornings still felt heavier than others. Today felt like one of those mornings, though he had no idea why. By 7:30, both William and Kate were dressed and walking down the marble staircase toward their private dining room. The palace staff had already set their breakfast table with fine china and silver cutlery, but the formal setting always made their morning meals feel less like a family breakfast and more like a business meeting. Kate poured herself a cup of tea while William reached for the morning newspapers that were neatly arranged beside his plate. The headlines were full of the usual political arguments and celebrity scandals that filled British newspapers every day. William skimmed through the main stories while Kate stirred honey into her tea and gazed out the window at the palace gardens. The winter had been mild so far, but today looked like it might bring rain based on the gray clouds gathering in the sky. Their conversation that morning was typical of most royal couples discussing schedules and upcoming events. William mentioned a meeting he had about environmental protection policies, while Kate talked about a charity lunch she was supposed to attend later in the week. They also discussed their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, and whether they should change their weekend plans based on the weather forecast. Kate took small bites of her toast, but seemed distracted by something outside the window. A gardener was working in the flower beds despite the cold weather, and she watched him carefully tending to plants that would bloom again in spring. Something about his dedication to caring for things that others might not notice struck her as beautiful and important. William noticed his wife was quieter than usual but did not push her to talk about whatever was on her mind. After 11 years of marriage, he had learned when to give Kate space to work through her thoughts. Instead, he focused on reading a report about homelessness in Britain that had been prepared by one of his staff members. The numbers in the report were troubling, showing that more families than ever were struggling to keep their homes, especially during the winter months. William read about children who had to change schools because their families could not afford rent and parents who worked multiple jobs but still could not make ends meet. The statistics felt cold and distant until he started reading individual stories about real families facing these challenges. At exactly 8:15, their private secretary knocked on the dining room door to remind them about their scheduled activities for the day. William had meetings about his mental health charity work, while Kate was supposed to review plans for a children's hospital visit next month. Both of them nodded and finished their breakfast, knowing that their quiet morning time together was coming to an end. Neither William nor Kate realized as they sat in their comfortable dining room that this would be the last normal morning they would have for quite some time. In just a few hours, their lives would take an unexpected turn that would change how they saw their role as members of the royal family and as human beings who cared deeply about others. The morning routine continued just like hundreds of other mornings before it, with no sign of the emotional journey that awaited them both. Kate was organizing charity event photographs in her private office when the morning took an unexpected turn at 11:30. Her personal secretary, Emma, entered the room looking puzzled and slightly nervous as she held the office telephone in her hands. Emma explained that a journalist from Cardiff was on the line asking to speak directly with Princess Kate about an urgent family matter. This type of direct contact was highly unusual because all media requests normally went through the palace press office first. Emma told Kate that the reporter seemed genuine and emotional rather than pushy or demanding like some journalists could be. The man had identified himself as James Williams from the Cardiff Daily News and insisted that his story was too important to go through normal channels. Kate felt curious about what could make a reporter feel desperate enough to bypass official protocol. She told Emma to put the call through to her private line, which was something she rarely did for unknown callers. Kate picked up the phone and introduced herself, politely asking James Williams how she could help him. James Williams could hardly believe he was actually speaking with the Princess of Wales. His voice shook slightly as he explained that he had been covering local news stories for 15 years, but had never encountered anything that made him feel compelled to contact the royal family directly. He told Kate that he was calling about a 6-year-old girl named Emma Jenkins, whose innocent question had touched his heart so deeply that he could not stop thinking about it. The reporter began telling Kate about a house fire that had happened 3 weeks earlier in a working-class neighborhood of Cardiff. The Jenkins family had lost their entire home and all their possessions when an electrical fault caused flames to spread through their small house in the middle of the night. David and Sarah Jenkins had managed to escape with their 3 children, but everything they owned had been destroyed. Kate listened carefully as James described the family situation. David Jenkins worked 2 demanding jobs to support his family, including driving delivery trucks during the day and stocking grocery store shelves 3 nights each week. Sarah Jenkins volunteered at a local food bank every weekend, despite her own family struggling financially, because she believed in helping others who faced difficult circumstances. The fire had been particularly devastating because it happened just 3 weeks before Christmas. David and Sarah had been secretly saving money for months to buy special Christmas presents for their children, Emma, aged 6, Jack, aged 10, and baby Sophie, who was 18 months old. All of those carefully chosen gifts had been destroyed, along with the children's toys, clothes, and books. James Williams' voice became emotional as he told Kate about visiting the temporary housing center where the Jenkins family was now staying. He had gone there to write a follow-up story about families displaced by the fire and had spent time talking with the children about how they were coping with their loss. Little Emma Jenkins had been sitting at a table coloring with donated crayons when she looked up at James and asked him a question that completely caught him off guard. Emma wanted to know why Prince William and Princess Kate could not come help her family the same way they helped other people she had seen on television news programs. The child's question was asked with such innocent hope and trust that James found himself struggling to find an appropriate answer. Emma explained to him that she had seen the prince and princess visiting hospitals and helping children who were sick or sad. She could not understand why they would not want to help her family who had lost their home and needed kindness from important people. James told Kate that Emma's parents had tried to explain that royal visits required months of advance planning and only happened for very special occasions. But Emma remained convinced that if the prince and princess knew about her family's situation, they would surely want to come help them, because they seemed like caring people on television. Kate felt her eyes filling with tears as she listened to this story. The pure faith of a 6-year-old child who believed that help would come from people she had never met reminded Kate of her own children and their trusting view of the world. She thought about George, Charlotte, and Louis sleeping safely in their comfortable beds, while little Emma Jenkins was living in temporary housing, wondering why the people she admired would not come help her family. The reporter continued explaining that Emma had been drawing pictures of Prince William and Princess Kate coming to visit her family. She showed these drawings to other children at the housing center and told them confidently that the royal visitors would arrive soon because good people always helped families in trouble. William listened to every word Kate told him about the phone call from Cardiff and felt his heart sink as she described the Jenkins family situation. When Kate finished explaining about little Emma and her innocent question about why they could not help her family, William was quiet for a long moment. His meeting about environmental policies suddenly seemed much less important than it had 30 minutes earlier. Without hesitation, William told Kate that they should go to Cardiff that very afternoon to meet the family. Kate was surprised by how quickly he made this decision, because William was usually very careful about following royal protocol and proper planning procedures. But something about this story had affected him deeply, and he felt they needed to act immediately rather than wait for official arrangements to be made. William ended his meeting early and met Kate in their private quarters at exactly 1:30 in the afternoon. They both changed into casual clothes that would not draw attention from curious onlookers. Kate chose a simple blue sweater and dark jeans, while William wore a plain gray sweater and black trousers. They looked like any other married couple getting ready for an afternoon drive through the countryside. Their security team was surprised when William and Kate announced they wanted to take a spontaneous trip to Wales with minimal protection detail. The head of security tried to explain that such trips required advance planning and coordination with local police, but William firmly stated that they would be traveling with just 2 officers in an unmarked car. By 2 o'clock, William and Kate were sitting in the back seat of a black Range Rover, driving through the streets of London toward the highway that would take them to Wales. Kate had brought a small bag containing some children's books and coloring supplies that she kept in her office for hospital visits. She was not sure why she had packed these items, but something told her they might be useful. The drive to Cardiff normally took about 3 hours, but their driver knew back roads that would help them avoid heavy traffic and curious photographers. As they traveled through the English countryside, Kate kept reading more information about house fires and homelessness on her phone. She learned that many families who lose their homes in fires struggle for months to rebuild their lives, especially when they do not have insurance to cover their losses. William watched the scenery pass by their car windows and thought about his own children who were safe at school having normal Tuesday activities. He imagined how George, Charlotte, and Louis would feel if they suddenly lost their home and had to sleep in an unfamiliar place surrounded by strangers. The thought made him feel sick to his stomach and more determined than ever to meet the Jenkins family. Kate called the housing center where the family was staying and spoke with the manager to ask if they could visit that afternoon. She did not identify herself as the Princess of Wales, but simply said she was a friend who had heard about the Jenkins family situation and wanted to offer some support. The manager was happy to arrange a meeting and gave Kate directions to the facility. As they drove through Wales, Kate and William talked about what they would say to the family and how they could best help without making the situation feel awkward or overwhelming. They decided to keep their visits simple and informal, focusing on listening to the family rather than making speeches or formal presentations. The closer they got to Cardiff, the more nervous Kate became about whether they were doing the right thing. Royal visits were usually planned months in advance, with careful coordination between palace staff, local officials, and security teams. This spontaneous trip broke every rule in the royal handbook, but both Kate and William felt strongly that some situations required immediate action rather than proper procedures. William reached over and squeezed Kate's hand as they entered the outskirts of Cardiff. He told her that even if their visit helped just one child feel less alone, it would be worth breaking protocol. Kate smiled and squeezed his hand back, knowing that they were both thinking about their own children and how fortunate their family was to have security and stability. At 4:15, their car pulled into the parking lot of the temporary housing center where the Jenkins family was staying. The building looked like a converted school with long hallways and small rooms that housed families who had lost their homes due to fires, floods, or other emergencies. Kate and William took deep breaths as they prepared to meet people whose lives had been turned upside down by circumstances beyond their control. Neither of them realized that the next few hours would change their understanding of what it meant to serve others and showed genuine compassion in a world that often felt cold and distant. The manager of the temporary housing center was organizing paperwork at the front desk when she looked up and saw 2 people walking through the main entrance at exactly 4:30. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her because the man and woman approaching her desk looked remarkably like Prince William and Princess Kate, but that seemed impossible since no royal visit had been scheduled. Margaret Evans had worked at the housing center for 12 years and had seen many surprising things, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. When William and Kate introduced themselves, she actually laughed out loud, thinking someone was playing an elaborate practical joke on her. It was only when their security officers showed their identification that Margaret realized the Prince and Princess of Wales were actually standing in her lobby. Margaret quickly tried to straighten her uniform and apologize for the casual state of the building, but Kate immediately put her at ease by saying they preferred informal settings where people could be comfortable and natural. William asked if they could meet the Jenkins family without causing too much disruption to the other residents who were also dealing with difficult situations. The housing center was buzzing with activity as families prepared dinner in the communal kitchen and children played in the recreation area. Most of the residents were focused on their own daily routines and did not notice the two well-dressed visitors walking through the hallways with Margaret as their guide. David Jenkins was helping his wife Sarah feed baby Sophie in the dining area when Margaret approached their table with William and Kate following behind her. David looked up expecting to see another social worker or volunteer, but instead found himself staring at two people he had only seen on television and in newspapers. 6-year-old Emma Jenkins was sitting at the table coloring in an activity book that had been donated to the housing center when she noticed the adults around her had stopped talking. She looked up and saw a man and woman she recognized from the television programs her parents watched about the royal family. Emma dropped her crayon and whispered to her mother that the prince and princess were really there. 10-year-old Jack Jenkins had been reading a library book while eating his dinner, but put it down when he saw his parents' shocked expressions. He had always been mature for his age and understood that his family was going through a very difficult time, but nothing could have prepared him for seeing members of the royal family walking toward their table. Sarah Jenkins was holding baby Sophie, who had been fussing during dinner, but the baby became quiet, as if sensing that something unusual was happening. Sarah looked at her husband David with confusion and wondered, not sure if she should stand up or remain seated, or what the proper protocol was for meeting royalty in a homeless shelter. William and Kate approached the table slowly, not wanting to overwhelm the family or make them feel uncomfortable. Kate spoke first, introducing herself and William in a gentle voice and asking if they could sit down and talk with the family for a few minutes. She explained that they had heard about their situation from a local reporter and wanted to meet them personally. Emma Jenkins found her voice first and asked Kate if she was really a princess like the ones in her storybooks. Kate smiled and sat down in the plastic chair next to Emma, explaining that she was a real person who happened to have a special job helping people just like Emma's parents helped people in their community. David Jenkins struggled to find words to express how surprised and honored he was by their visit. He had worked hard all his life to provide for his family and felt embarrassed that they were now living in temporary housing dependent on charity from others. William seemed to understand David's feelings and assured him that needing help did not make him less of a man or father. Other families in the dining area began to notice that something special was happening at the Jenkins table, but Margaret asked them to give the family privacy during their conversation. Word spread quickly through the building that members of the royal family were visiting, but most residents respected the request to keep their distance. Kate asked Emma about her favorite toys and games that had been lost in the fire, while William talked with Jack about the books he enjoyed reading. Both children began to relax as they realized that these famous visitors were genuinely interested in hearing about their lives and experiences. Baby Sophie reached toward Kate, who gently took her hand and spoke softly to her in the same tone she used with her own children. Sarah watched in amazement as the Princess of Wales interacted naturally with her baby daughter, as if they had known each other for years rather than minutes. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with William and Kate listening carefully to every detail the family shared about their life before the fire and their hopes for rebuilding their future. Neither William nor Kate made any promises during this initial conversation, but their genuine interest and compassion were obvious to everyone watching. What happened next surprised everyone in the dining room, including William and Kate themselves. Instead of maintaining the formal distance that usually characterized royal visits, Kate got down on the floor next to Emma's chair and asked to see the coloring book she had been working on when they arrived. Emma showed Kate her drawing of a house with a red roof and yellow flowers in the garden. Kate admired the artwork and asked Emma to tell her about the house in the picture. Emma explained that it was the house she lived in before the fire and pointed to different windows where her bedroom and her parents' room had been located. Kate's voice became soft and gentle as Emma described her lost bedroom and the toys that had been destroyed in the fire. The little girl mentioned a toy horse that had been her favorite possession and how she had tried to save it, but the fire had melted most of it beyond recognition. Emma reached into her small backpack and pulled out a partially melted plastic horse that was barely recognizable, but still precious to her. When Kate saw the damaged toy horse, she felt tears forming in her eyes and had to take a deep breath to maintain her composure. She gently held the melted toy and told Emma that it must have been very special to her, and that it was wonderful that she had been able to save even this small part of it. Meanwhile, William had moved to sit next to 10-year-old Jack, who had been trying to be brave and mature throughout the family's difficult situation. Jack told William about his love for reading and how he had lost his entire collection of books in the fire, including some that had belonged to his grandfather before him. William asked Jack about his favorite stories and listened as the boy described adventure books and mysteries that had helped him escape into other worlds when life became too stressful. Jack's voice began to shake as he explained how much he missed having books to read at bedtime and how the temporary housing center only had a few children's books that were meant for much younger children. The emotional breaking point came when baby Sophie, who had been content in her mother's arms, suddenly started crying loudly. Sarah tried to calm her daughter, but Sophie continued to fuss and cry despite her mother's efforts to comfort her. Without thinking about royal protocol or proper behavior, Kate reached out and gently asked Sarah if she could hold Sophie for a moment. Sarah was surprised by the request, but handed her baby daughter to Kate, who immediately began rocking Sophie softly and humming a quiet lullaby. Kate's natural maternal instincts took over as she held Sophie close and continued humming while gently patting the baby's back. Sophie gradually stopped crying and relaxed in Kate's arms, as if she sensed the genuine care and love that Kate was offering. At the same time, William was listening to David Jenkins explain how helpless he felt as a father who could not replace the things his children had lost in the fire. David's voice cracked as he talked about working 2 jobs, but still not having enough money to buy new toys and books for his children before Christmas. David told William that he felt like he had failed his family by not being able to protect them from the fire and not being able to quickly restore their normal life. The pain in David's voice and the weight of his words hit William hard because he understood the deep fear that every parent carries about not being able to protect their children from harm. William found himself thinking about his own children and how devastated he would feel if he could not provide for their basic needs or keep them safe from danger. The connection between his own parental fears and David's real situation became overwhelming, and William felt tears forming in his own eyes. For the first time in any public setting, William allowed his emotions to show completely. Tears began to fall down his face as he listened to David's story and watched Kate holding baby Sophie with such tender care. Kate noticed William's tears and reached over with her free hand to squeeze his while she continued to comfort Sophie. The dining room became very quiet as other residents and staff members witnessed this extraordinary moment of genuine human emotion from 2 people they had only seen in formal royal settings. The tears on William's face and the gentle way Kate held Sophie showed everyone present that beneath their titles and status, they were simply 2 parents who understood the love and fear that comes with caring for children. The sight of William with tears in his eyes created a ripple effect throughout the dining room, as other families began to understand that something very special and unusual was happening. Margaret Evans had worked with homeless families for over a decade, but had never seen such genuine emotion from visitors, especially ones with such high social status. Kate continued to hold baby Sophie, who had completely calmed down and was now looking up at Kate with curious baby eyes. Kate found herself thinking about her own daughter Charlotte and how precious these early childhood moments were. She realized that Sarah Jenkins was experiencing the same maternal love and protective instincts, but under circumstances that were far more challenging and frightening. Sarah watched in amazement as the Princess of Wales cradled her daughter with the same natural tenderness that any experienced mother would show. Kate began talking softly to Sophie using the gentle baby talk that comes naturally to parents and caregivers. The baby responded by reaching up to touch Kate's face with her tiny fingers, creating a moment of pure connection between them. William wiped his eyes and took a shaky breath as he continued to listen to David's story. David explained that he had always been proud of his ability to work hard and provide for his family, even though they never had much money. The fire had stripped away not just their possessions, but also his confidence in his ability to be the father and husband his family needed. David's honesty about his feelings of failure touched something deep in William's heart, because every parent struggles with doubts about whether they are doing enough for their children. William realized that the only difference between himself and David was circumstances and luck rather than character or worthiness. Emma Jenkins had been watching the adults around her with a perceptive awareness that children often have in emotional situations. She seemed to understand that something important was happening even though she was too young to fully grasp all the details. Emma moved closer to Kate and gently patted Sophie's head, while Kate continued to hold her baby sister. Jack Jenkins sat quietly beside William, still processing the fact that a prince was sitting next to him in a homeless shelter and showing genuine interest in his problems. Jack had been trying to be strong for his family throughout their ordeal, but seeing William's emotional response gave him permission to acknowledge his own sadness and fear. Jack told William that he sometimes had nightmares about the fire and worried that it might happen again in their new home when they found one. William listened carefully and shared that he also had fears about protecting his children, and that these worries were normal for parents and children who had experienced frightening events. The conversation became deeper and more personal as both families began to share their hopes and fears with each other. Kate told Sarah about the challenges of balancing work responsibilities with raising children, while Sarah described her volunteer work at the food bank and how helping others had always been important to her family. Other families in the housing center had gradually moved closer to witness this unprecedented scene. They'd maintained respectful distance, but were clearly moved by seeing members of the royal family interacting with such genuine care and emotion with people in their same situation. Margaret Evans later described this moment as the most powerful example of human compassion she had ever witnessed in her years of social work. She watched as barriers of class and status dissolved completely, leaving only people connecting with other people through shared experiences of love, worry, and hope. Kate's voice cracked slightly as she asked Emma about her memories of playing with the toy horse that had been damaged in the fire. Emma described tea parties and adventures she had imagined with her beloved toy, and Kate found herself crying along with the little girl as they talked about the loss of something so precious. William put his arm around Jack's shoulders as the boy described his favorite book that had belonged to his grandfather and contained handwritten notes in the margins. Jack explained that losing that particular book felt like losing a connection to his grandfather, who had died 2 years earlier. The emotional intensity of these conversations affected everyone in the room, including the security officers who were supposed to remain professionally detached, but found themselves moved by the genuine human connections they were witnessing. Kate looked up from baby Sophie and met William's eyes across the table. Without saying a word, they both understood that this visit had become something much more significant than they had planned. They were no longer representatives of the royal family making a charitable appearance, but simply two parents sharing a profound moment with another family facing unimaginable challenges. The tears that both William and Kate shed that evening were not tears of pity or sympathy, but tears of recognition and shared humanity. They saw themselves and their own children reflected in this family and understood that the love and fear they felt as parents was universal, regardless of wealth or social position. What had started as a planned 1-hour visit stretched into the evening as William and Kate found themselves unwilling to leave the Jenkins family and the other residents of the housing center. At 6 o'clock, William made a decision that surprised even Kate when he asked Margaret Evans if there was a way to order dinner for everyone in the building. Margaret explained that the housing center had a small kitchen where residents could prepare simple meals, but most families relied on donations from local restaurants and food banks for their evening meals. William immediately asked for the phone number of nearby restaurants and began calling to arrange food delivery for all 32 people currently staying at the center. Kate was still holding baby Sophie when she overheard William ordering fish and chips for everyone in the building. She smiled through her tears, realizing that her husband had made the same decision she was thinking about making. They were not ready to return to their comfortable palace while these families faced another night of uncertainty and temporary living conditions. The security officers looked concerned about the extended timeline, but William firmly told them that they would be staying for dinner, and anyone who had a problem with that decision could wait in the car. Kate added that they should consider this an official royal engagement, even though it had not been planned through proper channels. Emma Jenkins had been coloring quietly, while Kate held her baby sister, but looked up when she heard William talking about ordering dinner for everyone. Emma asked Kate if this meant they were staying to eat with them, and Kate confirmed that they wanted to share dinner with all the families if that would be acceptable. Jack Jenkins could not believe that the Prince and Princess of Wales were planning to eat fish and chips in a homeless shelter with his family. He had imagined that royal people only ate fancy food in elegant dining rooms, and the idea of sharing a casual meal seemed almost impossible to believe. When the food arrived at 7:30, the communal dining room was transformed into something resembling a neighborhood block party. William and Kate helped distribute plates and napkins, while families gathered around the long tables that were normally used for more somber purposes. Kate had finally handed baby Sophie back to Sarah, but remained close to the Jenkins family, as they all sat together around one of the tables. Emma insisted that Kate sit next to her, and began showing her more drawings she had made during their stay at the housing center. William found himself in conversation with several other fathers who were dealing with similar situations of job loss, housing problems, and the challenge of maintaining their children's sense of security during difficult times. The men were initially intimidated by talking with the prince, but William's genuine interest in their stories helped them relax. Other children in the housing center gradually approached Kate and William as they realized these special visitors were friendly and approachable. Kate spent time looking at artwork and school projects, while William listened to stories about favorite sports teams and video games. Margaret Evans watched in amazement as the dining room filled with laughter and conversation that had been missing during the difficult weeks these families had been staying at the center. The presence of William and Kate seemed to give everyone permission to feel hopeful and joyful despite their challenging circumstances. Sarah Jenkins told Kate about her volunteer work at the local food bank and how much she enjoyed helping other families, even though her own family was now receiving assistance. Kate was impressed by Sarah's continued commitment to helping others and asked detailed questions about the food bank's operations and needs. David Jenkins found himself explaining to William about his 2 jobs and his efforts to save money for a deposit on a new rental home. William listened carefully and asked thoughtful questions about the local job market and housing availability that showed he was genuinely interested in understanding the practical challenges David faced. As the evening continued, Kate noticed that Emma had drawn a new picture during dinner. This drawing showed a larger house with many windows and stick figures representing all the families from the housing center living together happily. Emma explained that she wished everyone could live in one big house where nobody would ever be homeless again. The innocence and hopefulness of Emma's drawing brought fresh tears to Kate's eyes as she realized that this 6-year-old child had already learned lessons about community and caring that many adults never understand. Kate asked Emma if she could keep the drawing, and Emma proudly agreed. By 8:30, the dining room was filled with the kind of warm, comfortable atmosphere that comes when people feel safe and cared for. William and Kate had not planned to spend their entire evening at the housing center, but neither of them wanted to leave this sense of community and connection they had discovered. Kate looked around the room at children playing games and parents talking together, as if they were old friends rather than strangers thrown together by difficult circumstances. She realized that this was exactly the kind of work she and William should be doing, using their position and resources to create moments of hope and dignity for people who had been forgotten by society. As the evening drew to a close, William and Kate knew they needed to return to London, but neither of them felt ready to say goodbye to the Jenkins family and the other residents they had met. At 9 o'clock, Kate made a decision that would shock the palace staff when they learned about it later that night. Kate asked Sarah Jenkins for her phone number and gave Sarah her own personal mobile number in return. This type of direct contact between members of the royal family and private citizens was completely against protocol, but Kate felt that maintaining this connection was more important than following traditional rules. Sarah could not believe that the Princess of Wales wanted to stay in touch with her family directly. She carefully wrote down Kate's number in her phone and gave Kate her own contact information along with David's work number and Emma's favorite color in case Kate wanted to send any messages to the little girl. William was having a similar conversation with David about staying connected after their visit. William gave David his private phone number and asked him to call if the family needed any assistance with housing applications or job searches. David was amazed that a prince was offering to personally help with such practical matters. Emma Jenkins had been listening to these adult conversations and suddenly asked Kate if she would really be able to call and talk to her sometimes. Kate knelt down to Emma's eye level and promised that she would call to check on her and find out how she was adjusting to whatever new home they found. Kate made another promise that surprised everyone, including William. She told Emma that she would personally help her find a new toy horse to replace the one that had been damaged in the fire. Kate explained that while the new horse could never replace the special memories of the original one, it might help create new happy memories. Jack Jenkins had been quiet during most of the evening, but approached William as they were preparing to leave. Jack asked William if he really meant it when he said he would help him find new books to read. William assured Jack that he would personally select books that he thought Jack would enjoy and have them delivered to wherever the family moved. The most surprising promise came when Kate suggested that the entire Jenkins family should visit them at Kensington Palace once they were settled into their new home. William immediately agreed with this invitation, and both of them assured David and Sarah that this was a genuine offer, not just polite conversation. Margaret Evans overheard this invitation and later said it was the most extraordinary thing she had witnessed in her career. Royal invitations to private citizens were extremely rare and usually involved people who had made significant contributions to charity or public service, rather than families who simply needed help. Other families in the housing center gathered around to say goodbye to William and Kate as they prepared to leave. Several parents thanked them for treating their children with such kindness and respect, while children hugged both Kate and William, as if they were saying goodbye to favorite relatives. Kate promised Emma that she would call her within a week to check on how she was doing and to start planning their horse shopping adventure. Emma made Kate promise to remember that she liked white horses with long manes because those were the most beautiful kind in her opinion. William assured Jack that he would visit bookstores within the next few days to find interesting books for a 10-year-old boy who loved adventure stories and mysteries. Jack asked William to include some books about princes and castles so he could learn more about royal life. Before leaving, Kate wrote her personal email address on a piece of paper for Sarah and asked her to send photos of the children as they adjusted to their new living situation. Sarah promised to keep Kate updated on Emma's progress in school and baby Sophie's development milestones. David shook hands with William and told him that this had been the most hopeful evening his family had experienced since the fire. William replied that meeting the Jenkins family had reminded him why his royal duties were important and meaningful rather than just ceremonial obligations. As William and Kate walked toward their car, they stopped several times to wave goodbye to children who were watching from the windows of the housing center. Kate was carrying Emma's drawing of the big house where everyone could live together happily and had promised to frame it and hang it in her office. The drive back to London was quiet as both William and Kate processed the emotional intensity of their evening. They had broken numerous royal protocols but felt certain that they had done exactly what they needed to do as human beings who cared about others. Kate called her personal assistant from the car and asked her to clear their schedules for the next morning so they could begin keeping the promises they had made to the Jenkins family. William added that they would need help coordinating toy shopping, book purchasing, and housing assistance without drawing media attention to the family's situation. By the time they arrived back at Kensington Palace at midnight, both William and Kate knew that their lives had been changed by their encounter with the Jenkins family, and that they would never again be satisfied with purely ceremonial royal duties that did not involve genuine human connection and practical help for people in need. 3 days after their visit to Cardiff, William and Kate had already begun keeping every promise they had made to the Jenkins family. Kate had spent Wednesday morning shopping for toy horses and had found a beautiful white mare with a flowing mane that she hoped would bring Emma as much joy as her original toy had provided. William had visited 2 different bookstores and carefully selected 15 books that he thought Jack would enjoy, including adventure stories, mystery novels, and several books about castles and royal history. He had also included a leather-bound notebook where Jack could write his own stories and thoughts. The story of their unplanned visit only became public knowledge when Margaret Evans mentioned it to a reporter from the local Cardiff newspaper who had been following up on housing center activities. Margaret had not intended to create media attention, but felt that people should know about the extraordinary compassion William and Kate had shown. When the newspaper story was published online, it spread rapidly through social media and international news outlets. People around the world were amazed to read about members of the royal family spending an entire evening in a homeless shelter sharing fish and chips with families in need. The photograph that accompanied the news story showed William and Kate sitting on the floor with the Jenkins family, surrounded by other residents of the housing center. All of them were laughing together, and the tear stains were still visible on William and Kate's faces from their emotional conversations earlier in the evening. Palace officials were initially concerned about the breach of protocol and the lack of advance planning, but quickly realized that public reaction to the story was overwhelmingly positive. People were praising William and Kate for showing genuine humanity and caring rather than maintaining formal royal distance. Kate called Emma Jenkins on Friday morning as she had promised and spent 20 minutes talking with the excited 6-year-old about her new temporary school and the friends she was making at the housing center. Emma told Kate that she had been telling everyone about meeting a real princess and that some people did not believe her story. William called David Jenkins that same afternoon to check on the family's housing search and job situation. David reported that several local employers had contacted him about job opportunities after reading the newspaper story, and that 2 landlords had offered to waive security deposits if his family wanted to rent their properties. The Jenkins family was able to move into a beautiful 3-bedroom house just 2 weeks after their visit from William and Kate. The landlord had been so moved by their story that he offered them reduced rent for the first 6 months to help them get back on their feet. David had also received a job offer with better pay and regular daytime hours that would allow him to spend more time with his children. Emma Jenkins received her white toy horse from Kate on a Saturday morning when a special delivery arrived at their new home. Inside the package was not just one horse, but an entire collection of toy horses, along with a handwritten note from Kate telling Emma how brave and special she was. Emma immediately called Kate using the phone number she had been given and spent 30 minutes describing each horse in detail. Jack Jenkins was equally thrilled when William personally delivered his collection of books to their new house the following weekend. William had driven to their neighborhood without any security detail or media attention and spent 2 hours sitting in their living room reading stories with Jack and discussing their favorite characters and adventures. Baby Sophie had grown and was starting to walk by the time Kate visited them again in February. Kate brought toys and clothes for Sophie along with a photo album containing pictures from their evening at the housing center. Sarah treasured these photographs because they captured a moment when her family had felt hopeless, but discovered that strangers could become friends who truly cared about their well-being. The promised visit to Kensington Palace took place in March when the Jenkins family spent an entire day with William and Kate and their children. Emma played with Princess Charlotte, while Jack shared his love of reading with Prince George. David and Sarah were amazed by how normal and down-to-earth the royal family was in their private home setting. Margaret Evans from a housing center received a surprise visit from Kate in April when she came to deliver donations and spend time with current residents. Kate had realized that her experience with the Jenkins family was just one example of the daily struggles faced by many families, and she wanted to make regular visits part of her royal duties. The photograph of William and Kate sitting on the floor with tears in their eyes became one of the most iconic royal images of the year. It was displayed in museums and used in charity campaigns because it perfectly captured the moment when two privileged people chose to open their hearts completely to others who needed compassion and support. Other members of the royal family began following William and Kate's example by making unplanned visits to shelters, hospitals, and community centers. The traditional formal approach to royal duties started changing as more royals realized that genuine human connection was more valuable than ceremonial appearances. William and Kate never forgot the lesson they learned that December evening in Cardiff. They discovered that their most important role was not to be distant symbols of authority, but to be real people who could offer hope, love, and practical help to families facing difficult circumstances. Years later, when Emma Jenkins graduated from university with a degree in social work, she credited her meeting with William and Kate as the moment that inspired her to dedicate her life to helping other families in crisis. She kept the white toy horse from Kate on her desk as a reminder that small acts of kindness can change lives forever. The emotional appearance that no one expected became the beginning of a new chapter in royal service, where genuine care and human connection mattered more than protocol and tradition. William and Kate had learned that the most powerful thing they could offer the world was not their titles or status, but their authentic selves and their willingness to show up when people needed them most.